Charles Merrick made billions flipping property and hiding money. But the thing he loved most was reminding the world how beneath him they were. Every morning, he'd step over the homeless outside his luxury tower, dropping insults like crumbs. Today was no different, until he saw a black man kneel down, offering his own food to a man wrapped in rags. Charles scoffed, loud, pathetic, both of you. Can't tell the beggar from the help anymore. The man, quiet, steady, glanced up, gave a nod, and said nothing. He didn't argue. He didn't need to, because that man wasn't homeless. He wasn't broke. He wasn't ordinary. He was Special Agent Marcus Boyd, FBI, undercover, 6 months deep into an investigation. And Charles Merrick? He'd just insulted the man about to end his empire. 2 weeks later, Merrick's face was plastered across national news. Fraud, racketeering, conspiracy, money laundering. His fortune gone. His legacy, ashes. He thought he was mocking a nobody. But this time, he picked the wrong man. Speech balloon, ever seen karma hit this hard? Comment where you're watching from. Thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you believe respect should never be based on appearances. Marcus Boyd didn't stand out on the street by design. He wore the same faded hoodie every morning. His boots were worn, the soles thinning near the heel. Most days, he sat on a bench outside the Merrick Plaza building sipping gas station coffee, head down like he had nowhere to be. People passed him without a second glance. And that was exactly what he wanted. Midtown was full of ghosts like him, people the city didn't see. The unhoused, the underpaid, the unnoticed. To the executives and influencers walking into glass towers, Marcus was just another silhouette in the periphery. Maybe a man who missed too many chances. Maybe someone who never had one. But Marcus Boyd had a purpose. He watched everything. Every luxury SUV that pulled up. Every courier who came and went. Every man in an expensive suit with a secret in his eyes. Especially one man, Charles Merrick. To the world, Merrick was a real estate genius, built a billion-dollar empire off revitalizing forgotten neighborhoods. But to Marcus, Merrick was a red flag with teeth. Over the past 6 months, Marcus had tracked deals that didn't add up, properties flipped overnight for triple their value, shell companies stacked like Russian dolls. It all pointed to one thing. Charles Merrick was washing dirty money clean, and he was arrogant enough to think no one would catch him. And maybe, until now, no one would have. Marcus had grown up around men like Merrick. He knew the look in their eyes, the mix of entitlement and amusement, like the world existed for their amusement and control. It didn't matter how careful Merrick was with lawyers, layers of LLCs, or political donations. Everyone left tracks, and Marcus was patient. Still, the job didn't come without its toll. Every day, Marcus had to keep his distance from the people he passed, people who were struggling. Real struggle, real homelessness, real hunger. There was one man in particular, Eli, older white Vietnam vet, beard like tumbleweed. He lived under scaffolding across from the plaza. Never begged, just sat with a cardboard sign that read, "Just need time." Marcus shared coffee with him when he could, sometimes a sandwich, sometimes just a nod. It wasn't much, but Eli always said the same thing. "You remind me I still exist." That morning was colder than usual. Sharp air, stiff wind off the East River. Marcus had just handed Eli half of a bacon, egg, and cheese when the black Mercedes pulled up. Charles Merrick stepped out like he owned the pavement. Rolex on the wrist, hair slicked back, the whole Wall Street devil aesthetic. His driver rushed to hold the umbrella over him, but Merrick waved him off. He saw Marcus crouch down, handing the sandwich over. And then he laughed, loud, dismissive, the kind of laugh that made strangers turn their heads. "Jesus Christ," Merrick said, voice sharp like a slap. "I can't tell who's feeding who. One bum feeding another. Welcome to New York." Marcus straightened slowly, wiped his hands on his jeans, looked Merrick dead in the eye. Merrick smiled wide like he was being charming. "Tell you what, fellas, there's a trash can down the block. You might find dessert." Marcus didn't speak. He just nodded, once. Merrick shrugged and walked inside, still chuckling to himself. The revolving doors swallowed him. Eli stared after him. Some people think they're kings. Marcus didn't answer. His fingers tightened around the coffee cup. He'd been collecting data for months. Paper trails, fake property audits, crypto laundering through overseas shell firms. Merrick thought he was untouchable, but Marcus had already submitted a preliminary case file to the Bureau. And in that moment, after being mocked, not just for himself, but for everybody Merrick looked down on, he made a silent decision. No more waiting. No more patience. It was time to bring this man down. The rest of that day was cold and unremarkable. The building's security didn't look twice at Marcus. Why would they? He was no threat. Just a man outside, always outside. But inside, Charles was moving money, holding closed-door meetings with Russian investors, signing off on falsified environmental reviews, buying politicians like toys. Marcus watched it all. He logged license plates, faces, timelines. His phone was a digital notebook of corruption. He never reacted, never revealed anything. But that night, after sending one final report to his handler, he walked past Eli's spot and quietly left a note next to the man's sleeping bag. It just said, "Thanks for reminding me what matters." The morning it all broke was a Wednesday. Headlines everywhere. Real estate tycoon Charles Merrick under federal investigation. IRS, FBI raids confirm ongoing fraud probe. Luxury mogul linked to international money laundering ring. TV trucks circled Merrick Plaza. Executives scrambled out of the building like rats leaving a burning yacht. And Marcus? He sat across the street, hoodie up, sipping his coffee like always. A small smile tugged at the edge of his mouth. Merrick came out under heavy security, barking into his phone, the blood drained from his smug face. He spotted Marcus. Their eyes locked. Something flickered in Charles's expression. Recognition? Confusion? Regret? Too late. Because this time, the man he mocked wasn't a nobody. This time, he insulted the wrong one. 2 days before the raid, Marcus was forced to watch something he couldn't ignore. It was just after 9 a.m., the cold air sharp and wet with fog. Marcus had been stationed outside Merrick Plaza, like always. Hoodie up, backpack slung low, one hand clutching a busted thermos. He saw Eli being shoved. 2 private security guards, new hires, probably green and trying to prove themselves, had cornered him by the entrance. One of them pointed toward the curb. "You've been told, old man. You can't loiter here. Go stink up somewhere else." Eli stood firm, gripping his walker. "I'm not bothering anyone." "Yeah, well, you're bothering us." The other one stepped forward and knocked over Eli's small pile of blankets. "Go before I call the cops." Marcus started moving before his brain told him to. "Back off," he said, stepping in between them. The guards lingered.
"Oh,
then one of them muttered,
"You two working
whatever,
as a
man,"
team now,"
and they walked
They
off.
squared up,
but not before
Marcus
spitting on
kept
the
his
sidewalk.
voice low.
Eli's
Steady.
hands
"Try putting
shook
your hands on
as
him
Marcus
again.
helped him gather
See
his
what
things.
happens."
"I'm fine," he muttered, but his eyes said otherwise. Defeated. Humiliated. "They don't see you," Marcus said quietly. "But I do." That night, Marcus stayed awake. Not because of the case files, not because of surveillance, but because of the truth. No matter how big the takedown, the world was still wired to protect men like Merrick and crush people like Eli. People like him. It wasn't enough to just win. It had to mean something. The next day, Marcus intercepted a courier outside the building. He'd seen this guy a few times, neutral face, khaki vest, always delivering thick, sealed envelopes to Merrick's private office. This time, Marcus followed him when he left. The guy took a sharp turn off 5th Avenue, ducking into a second-floor walk-up above a shady insurance agency. Marcus waited 20 minutes, then walked past and snapped a photo of a mailbox. 2 names stood out. North, Hollow Holdings. Grafton Consulting Group. Both were shell corporations linked to Merrick. That was the final piece. Marcus uploaded the photos, time-stamped them, and sent the complete file to his handler. But he didn't feel relief. Not yet, because Merrick wasn't just rich. He was protected. Old money, political ties, friends on golf courses, and in closed-door fundraisers. Exposing him would rattle more than just one man's life. It would shake the whole damn food chain. The FBI was ready, but Marcus knew how these things went. Sometimes the worst men still walked away untouched. Unless the story changed. Unless the narrative shifted. He needed the world to see Merrick for what he truly was. So he set the trap. On purpose. The next morning, Marcus went back to the same bench with Eli. Sat there like nothing had changed. Let himself be seen. By security. By office workers. By Merrick. And Merrick noticed. He came out with his phone in hand, pretending to take a call, but really just looking for someone to talk down to. Like always. He saw Marcus. You again. Merrick said, mock surprise in his voice. Still pretending to be Mother Teresa for the rejects? Marcus stood up slowly. Calm. Ready. You really think no one's watching you? Merrick tilted his head, amused. Watching me? For what? Feeding the wildlife. Marcus stepped closer. For everything you think is hidden. Merrick's smile faltered. You're playing a dangerous game, friend. Marcus leaned in, voice low. You just lost it. He walked away, left Merrick standing there with nothing but questions and a sinking feeling in his gut. Later that day, Merrick made a call to a contact in City Hall, told him to check out the 2 bums hanging around my building. He wanted them moved. Quietly. That was the mistake, because the person he called was already cooperating with the feds. By trying to erase Marcus and Eli, he left a paper trail, confirmed his paranoia, confirmed he had something to hide. That same night, Marcus sat down with Eli for what would be the last time before the takedown. I won't be around after tomorrow, Marcus said. Eli raised an eyebrow. You quitting your bench job? I'm going back to what I was always meant to do. Eli nodded, slowly. You were never one of us, were you? I was, Marcus said, just not in the way you thought. He reached into his bag and pulled out a thick envelope. Cash. A lot of it. This is clean. Yours now. Get a place. Warm bed. Real food. Eli stared at the envelope, then up at Marcus. Why? Because you reminded me, Marcus said, that being seen is everything. The next morning, everything exploded. Federal agents stormed the building. Screens lit up with breaking news. FBI confirms major real estate bust in Manhattan. Inside Merrick's office, agents pulled file cabinets off their hinges. Merrick screamed at lawyers on speakerphone. The entire staff stood frozen in the lobby, whispering. Marcus wasn't there to see it. He was already on a train headed out of Manhattan. His job was done. By evening, Charles Merrick's world had collapsed. The money? Gone. Accounts frozen. The connections? Abandoned him. The public? Turned. Videos of him mocking the homeless were leaked online. One showed him laughing while stepping over a man in a wheelchair. It went viral in minutes. And the man who exposed him? They never saw him coming. Because he looked like someone they were taught to ignore. The raid wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. By Friday morning, Charles Merrick's name was all over the news. National headlines. Local talk radio. Financial analysts called it the biggest white-collar bust since the housing crash. But while the world gasped, Charles wasn't finished. Because men like Charles don't go down quietly. He still had friends in places most people didn't even know existed. His attorney, one of the most vicious litigators in New York, was already spinning a narrative, political witch hunt, racial targeting, and attack on success. Charles, for once in his life, wasn't smiling. But he wasn't defeated. Not yet. Meanwhile, Marcus Boyd sat in a government safe house outside the city. Window blinds drawn, laptop glowing in the dark. He'd turned over everything. Files, footage, statements, accounts. The FBI team thanked him, praised him. But something inside Marcus didn't feel complete. Because he'd seen it before. Corrupt men falling, only to rise again months later with cleaner suits and slicker lies. He needed this to stick. He needed the truth to matter. Back in the city, Eli was gone. Marcus had asked around discreetly. No one had seen him since that last night on the bench. Maybe he left the city. Maybe he finally found somewhere to sleep that didn't feel like a sidewalk. That gave Marcus some peace, but also left him alone. For the first time in months, he wasn't wearing a disguise. He walked the streets as himself. Black coat, Clean haircut, no hoodie, no thermos. And it was strange how invisible he still felt. People still didn't make eye contact, still avoided his path on the sidewalk, still crossed the street like old habits were hardwired. Even when he wasn't undercover, Marcus realized he still was. That thought sat with him heavier than any case file. By week's end, Merrick's legal team hit back hard. They claimed the FBI had no right to surveil him in public without a warrant, ignoring the irony that Merrick himself had installed most of the surveillance cameras in his properties to spy on tenants. Media outlets began to question the operation. Conservative networks aired segments painting Merrick as a victim of reverse profiling, citing unnamed sources who claimed the agent who brought him down pretended to be homeless to trap him. Marcus watched it unfold in silence. They weren't coming for just the evidence. They were coming for him. His supervisor called him in. The mood in the briefing room was tense. Everyone respected Marcus, but they also knew the game. "The pressure's real," she said, sliding a file toward him. "You sure you want to be the face of this?" He looked at the cover. His own photo, hood up, sitting on a bench. A freeze frame from a surveillance cam. "If you step out," she said, "they're going to rip your life apart." "I'm not stepping out," Marcus said. "Let them come." He stood up, took the file, and left without waiting for permission. That night, he sent a video to a friend in the press. A real one, not the talking heads. In it, Marcus sat on the same bench where Merrick mocked him. Hoodie back on. Same scuffed boots. No mask this time. He told the story, not of the raid, not of the money, but of the moment. The moment one man laughed at another for giving a damn. The moment two human beings were reduced to stereotypes, criminal and homeless, by a billionaire who thought wealth was immunity. And the moment he decided enough was enough. The video was 5 minutes long. It was posted anonymously, and by morning it had over 6 million views. Suddenly the tide shifted. People weren't just angry at Merrick for corruption, they were furious about his cruelty. Clips of him mocking the homeless resurfaced. Employees came forward. Former tenants told horror stories of illegal evictions, harassment, price gouging. Even city officials began to distance themselves. The narrative was no longer controlled by press releases. It belonged to the people now, but Merrick still had cards to play. On day 10 of the investigation, his legal team dropped a bomb. They were filing a civil suit against the FBI and Marcus personally, claimed emotional damage, entrapment, racial targeting. Marcus sat in the back of the courtroom as the statement was read. Merrick didn't look at him, not once, but Marcus didn't flinch, because in his bag was something stronger than any headline. A signed statement from a former accountant, one who had fled the country and just returned under witness protection. It detailed every offshore account, every fake invoice, every payoff. It was the nail in the coffin. But Marcus didn't hand it over yet. He wanted Merrick to see what it felt like to wait. That night, Marcus walked back to the plaza where it all began. It was quieter now. Security gone. Lights dimmer. Merrick Plaza was no longer a symbol of power. It was a sinking ship. Marcus sat on the bench, and for the first time in weeks, he saw a familiar face. Eli, wearing a new coat, face shaved, still tired, but different. They sat together without speaking for a long moment. Then Eli said, "You were never trying to disappear. You were trying to watch?" Marcus nodded. "I saw," Eli added, "the video, the trial, all of it." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded note. "Someone left this with the shelter. Said it was for you." Marcus opened it. Inside was a photo of Merrick's office. Empty, with a single sticky note on the desk. It read, "You can't buy your way out of truth." Marcus smiled. He didn't know who sent it, but it didn't matter. The truth was already out, and the world was finally watching. It was strange, the silence after storm. Charles Merrick's face had disappeared from the media almost overnight. No more damage control interviews. No more press conferences. His lawyers had gone quiet, corporate partners fled, and the Merrick name, once printed in gold across buildings, was now a ghost on every street he once walked proudly. But for Marcus Boyd, the noise hadn't stopped. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every corner of his life was under scrutiny, from right-wing bloggers calling him a race-baiting activist to anonymous threats telling him to go back to the street where you belong. A senator quietly pulled support from the case, citing uncertainty around procedural ethics. Even within the bureau, the tone had shifted. Colleagues started saying things like, "You went too visible," or "This got too political." He'd expected blowback. He hadn't expected to be the target of it. Marcus sat in a cheap hotel in Long Island City, the blinds drawn, his badge tucked in the drawer, beside him like a secret he wasn't sure he deserved anymore. He opened his laptop. A headline stared back at him. FBI agent who took down Merrick, hero or hustler? The article hinted at methodology concerns. Cherry-picked screenshots. A comment from an anonymous former superior who claimed Marcus had blurred professional and personal motivations. It was a gut punch. He'd spent months in the dirt for this case, living like a ghost, eating half his meals cold, giving every ounce of empathy he had to a city that didn't want to see itself. And now, they were twisting it, turning him into the question mark, not Merrick. The next morning, Marcus went into the bureau for a scheduled debrief. No fanfare. No congratulations, just a sterile white conference room and a folder of paperwork waiting on the table. His supervisor, Agent Ruiz, closed the door behind her. She looked tired. Not angry, just tired. "They're pulling your clearance," she said without looking at him. Marcus blinked. "For how long?" "Indefinite, pending internal review." He felt his throat tighten. "Are you serious?" "I'm not the enemy here," she said. "But you became part of the story. That makes people nervous." "I was the story," Marcus said, "because I had to be. No one else was going to do it." Ruiz nodded. "You did everything right. That's not the same as doing it safely." He left the office with no badge, no assignment, and no next move. He walked aimlessly for hours, through the subway, across the bridge, into neighborhoods he hadn't seen in years. At some point it started to rain, but he didn't care. The city blurred. By nightfall, he ended up back where it all started, Merrick Plaza. It was still empty, still quiet, but now the glass tower looked tired, dusty, like even the building itself had given up pretending. He sat on the old bench. No disguise this time. No camera. No surveillance. No mission. Just a man in the city, alone, uncertain, angry. He buried his face in his hands. What was the point? Merrick was ruined, but not punished. His lawyers were still filing appeals. His political donors were still holding out hope for a settlement. Even if he lost everything, he'd still be something. But Marcus? He was suspended, harassed, forgotten before the story had even finished. He'd fought for justice, and somehow ended up a casualty of it. And then someone sat beside him. Not Eli. A young woman. Late 20s. Messy curls. Hoodie 2 sizes too big. She didn't look at him right away. "You the guy from the video?" Marcus looked over, unsure if it was a threat or something else. "My brother used to sleep here," she said quietly. "OD'd 2 blocks away. Nobody cared. But that video, you said something about seeing people. About how it starts with that." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I remember." She turned to him, eyes red but steady. "That's the first time I felt like someone gave a damn about people like us. My brother. Me. All of it." She pulled a folded note from her pocket. "I carry this now," she said, placing it in his hand. "Wrote it after watching you." Then she stood and walked away. Marcus unfolded the paper. It read, "I'm not invisible. I matter. You reminded me." And just like that, something cracked inside him. Not broken, just released. Marcus went home that night and didn't turn on the news. Instead, he opened a fresh document on his laptop. He started typing. Not a report. Not an affidavit. A statement. Personal. Honest. Raw. He wrote about the system. About the people in its cracks. About what justice looks like when it's not about the courtroom, but about dignity. He didn't name names. He didn't call for revenge. He called for memory, for responsibility. He ended the letter with a single line. Justice begins the moment someone refuses to be unseen. He hit send, not to a network, to everyone. It went public in under 2 hours. And this time, no one could spin it. The letter Marcus wrote didn't trend instantly. It didn't explode into headlines. It simmered, passed from inbox to inbox, shared quietly in group chats, reposted with captions like, "This is what leadership looks like, and read this before you say the system works." And then it caught fire. By the end of the week, it had over 10 million views across platforms. Not because it was flashy, but because it was honest. The kind of honesty no press conference or court filing could touch. Meanwhile, Charles Merrick's legal team was bleeding. The appeals weren't working. Whistleblowers kept coming forward. An anonymous source from his own company leaked hundreds of internal emails showing decades of fraud and coercion. But the final blow? It wasn't numbers. It wasn't money. It was a person. Her name was Adrienne Wolfe. She'd worked for Merrick 10 years ago. At first, just a junior finance assistant. But over time, she'd become one of his most trusted analysts until she vanished from the industry completely. No one knew why. Until now. Adrienne stepped into a packed courtroom, hands steady, eyes forward, and laid everything bare. She had kept copies of documents, signed bank authorizations, recordings of private conversations where Merrick admitted using nonprofits to hide offshore transfers. And one more thing, an email addressed to a private fixer instructing them to track down and handle a suspicious man outside the building, the man giving food to a homeless person. Marcus. The courtroom went dead silent. The prosecutor read the email out loud. Discreetly remove him. I don't care how. Make it permanent if necessary. Gasps. Camera shutters. A reporter dropped her pen. That wasn't just financial crime. That was intent to harm a federal agent. Merrick's attorney froze. His client's smirk vanished. And Marcus, sitting in the gallery, dressed in a suit for the first time since his suspension, didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The room already knew. Outside the courtroom, the story shifted again. News outlets didn't just run the email. They ran Marcus's full letter, now verified and widely shared. Images of him giving food to Eli were splashed across the screen next to Merrick's scowl. It was no longer a story about fraud. It was a story about human worth. About the line between cruelty and character. The FBI reinstated Marcus the next day. No ceremony. Just a call, a meeting, and his badge returned, placed on the table with quiet respect by Agent Ruiz. "You were right," she said. "You did what needed doing." Marcus nodded, but he wasn't smiling. This was never about me. The public wanted interviews, TV, podcasts, profiles. Marcus declined them all. He wasn't looking to be famous. He was looking to finish something. 1 week later, Adrienne Wolfe joined Marcus on a small stage at a downtown policy summit focused on ethics and economic justice. She spoke first, explaining her silence, her fear, and the guilt that haunted her since the day she left Merrick's company. Then it was Marcus's turn. He stepped to the mic. The room fell still. "I didn't come here as a symbol," he said, "or as an agent, or even as the man in the video." He paused. "I came here because one man with power decided that people who had nothing deserved to be erased, and too many stood by and let him." He let the silence sit. "I'm not here to take a victory lap. I'm here to remind you that justice doesn't begin in court. It begins the moment we decide that no one is beneath notice." Applause. Not wild, but real. The kind that means something. That night, as Marcus walked home, he passed Merrick Plaza one last time. The building was being gutted. A "for sale" sign draped over the entrance. The letters spelling Merrick had already been removed, leaving behind nothing but dirt outlines and faded glue. A ghost of power that no longer existed. Across the street, on the same old bench, sat someone new. Young, wrapped in layers, nervous, hungry. Marcus crossed the street, opened the bag of takeout in his hand, and offered the extra container. "Chicken and rice," he said. "Best in the city." The kid hesitated, then took it. and for a moment their eyes met. Not pity, not charity, just recognition. The same kind Marcus gave Eli. The same kind someone once gave him. Power doesn't vanish quietly. Even after Charles Merrick was exposed, indicted, and dragged across every headline in the country, pieces of the system that had protected him for years kept moving in the shadows. Private interests whispered into media channels. Think tanks published studies questioning the ethics of undercover tactics. One article ran with the headline, FBI agent pushed too far? When justice becomes personal. Another accused Marcus of setting a precedent for vigilante behavior inside federal agencies. They weren't attacking his evidence anymore. They were attacking him. Again. But this time it didn't land the same. Because people knew Marcus now, not just as a badge number, not just as a name in the footnotes of an indictment. They knew his face, his voice, his story, and they had seen what he stood for. Still, pressure from above mounted. Marcus was offered a quiet transfer. Less visibility, less noise. For his own safety, they said. He said no. He didn't yell. He didn't protest. He just kept showing up to the same office, same desk, same commitment. Not for vengeance, but for the people who couldn't walk into rooms like that and speak for themselves. Meanwhile, Charles Merrick sat in a detention center in upstate New York, awaiting trial. No bail. Too much risk. Even behind bars, he made calls, through lawyers, through surrogates, through the kind of people who don't leave paper trails, but each attempt to sway the case got blocked. New evidence poured in. Testimonies grew stronger. Witnesses found courage in numbers. The system that had once bent for him was starting to lean away, because now the world was watching. The Justice Department faced a choice. Let Marcus take the fall for making the Bureau look emotional or stand with him and shift how justice is defined. At first, they hesitated, but then something unexpected happened. One of the attorneys in the Bureau's ethics office, an older white man, former military, spoke up during a closed-door meeting. He pushed the folder across the table and said, "We've spent decades teaching agents how to blend in, how to follow. Maybe it's time we taught them how to lead." That changed the tone in the room. And eventually the outcome. Marcus wasn't reprimanded. He was promoted, officially reassigned as a senior field instructor for ethics and urban surveillance at Quantico. His new job? Train the next generation of agents on how to navigate morally complex cases and not lose their humanity in the process. It wasn't about climbing a ladder. It was about building better ones. Still, Marcus didn't take time to celebrate. Because the fallout wasn't just political, it was personal. Some people stopped calling. Old friends from within the Bureau distanced themselves. Not out of malice, just discomfort. His presence reminded them of a mirror they didn't want to look into. He understood that, but it didn't make it hurt less. So he leaned on what was real, a call from Adrian Wolf, a message from Eli, now living in a shelter that helped him get sober. Emails from students at law schools who said his letter made them rethink everything. Bit by bit, the cracks filled in. One afternoon, weeks later, Marcus stood in front of a classroom of recruits. He pulled up an image on the screen, Merrick Plaza, cold, shiny, soulless. He turned to the class. "Who do you see in this photo?" A few recruits responded. "A business district. Executive space. Someone rich probably owns it." Marcus nodded, then changed the slide. It was a blurry surveillance still, two men on a bench, one handing the other a sandwich. And now, the room was quiet. Then one voice said, "A story." Marcus smiled. "Exactly. Your job isn't just to follow evidence. It's to understand who that evidence belongs to, and why it matters." He shut off the projector. Justice without empathy is just punishment. Don't forget that. Outside the building, a reporter waited near the sidewalk. She asked him, "Do you think Charles Merrick got what he deserved?" Marcus paused. "No," he said. "I think he got what he earned." "And what about you?" Marcus didn't answer at first. Then, "I didn't do this to get anything. I did it so fewer people have to lose everything before they're believed." She tried to ask more, but he walked away. He had nothing to prove. and everything to protect. Recognition doesn't always come with a standing ovation. Sometimes it comes quietly through a door left open, a seat offered, a silence held just long enough to feel like respect. Marcus Boyd had never been a man who needed applause, but after everything, the sting of backlash, the weight of exposure, the cold distance from some of the very people he fought alongside, it meant something when it finally came, and it started not with a news story but with a handshake. A month after Merrick's indictment, Marcus was invited to a private roundtable held by the Justice Department in D.C. A closed-door discussion on surveillance, ethics, agent autonomy, and undercover operations in urban environments. He expected a token seat at the edge of the table. Instead, his name was at the center, next to the Deputy Attorney General. As the conversation circled budgets, protocols, and political risk, Marcus listened. Patient, precise, and when the room turned to him for insight, he didn't sugarcoat it. I wasn't dangerous because I broke rules, he said. I was dangerous because I saw people the system didn't care to see. And I chose to act. The room was still. Then the deputy leaned forward and said, "We need more agents like you. Not fewer." It wasn't a headline, but it was the first time someone in real power said out loud what no one had dared to before. That same week, Marcus received a letter, handwritten. The return address was a small town in Illinois. Inside was a photo. Eli, standing in front of a white community center, holding a clipboard. Clean, sober, smiling. On the back, scribbled in messy pen. "They asked me to run the place. Said I had a way with people. Guess that's your fault." Below that, "I never got to say this. Thank you for seeing me when nobody else did." Marcus folded the photo carefully and kept it in his wallet. Recognition also came in the form of something else, an award, not from the FBI, not from the government, from a group of social workers and outreach coordinators in New York. They called it the Witness Award, given each year to someone who helped the city see what it had ignored for too long. When Marcus walked on stage, he didn't expect the room to rise. But they did, not out of fame, out of understanding, out of gratitude. During his short speech, he said, "Justice isn't always about the big wins. It's about restoring the dignity that injustice tried to erase. I didn't just take down a man who broke the law. I stood up to a culture that treats compassion like weakness. And I'd do it again." He stepped down to a room full of people who had lived that truth their whole lives. For once, he didn't feel like an outsider among them. He felt like part of something real. But the most meaningful recognition came unexpectedly on a rainy afternoon outside a Bronx courthouse. Marcus was heading out of a policy meeting when a teenage boy called out from across the sidewalk, "You the FBI guy?" Marcus turned, cautious. The kid jogged up, maybe 16, hoodie, too thin for the weather, but a fire in his eyes. "I saw the video. And the letter," the boy said. "My uncle was locked up for something he didn't do. No one cared. But after your thing went viral, people started listening. I wanted to say..." He trailed off. Marcus gave him a soft nod. "You're heard," he said. The kid smiled. "A real one. Then, I think I want to do what you do." Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "Then do it. And do it better." Recognition isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a single voice, breaking the cycle of being overlooked. Sometimes it's a stranger holding your name with care. Sometimes it's the first time someone says what should have been said years ago. "You were right. You mattered. You made us better." Later that week, Marcus returned to the plaza where it all started. It looked different now. The Merrick name was long gone. The building under new ownership. But the bench? Still there. Same old cracks. Same chipped paint. He sat down, not to blend in, but to be still. To remember, to honor it. And as the city moved around him, fast, messy, distracted, he felt something rare. Not victory, but peace. Marcus Boyd never wanted to be a symbol. But what happens to people like him, people who carry the weight, fight the fight, and refuse to let the system flatten them, is that whether they ask for it or not, others start to look toward them. And the only question left is, what do you do with that light when it finally finds you? Marcus didn't retire. He didn't cash out or take a book deal. He stayed in the field, but he changed the field around him. And then he did something no one expected. He opened a door. In a modest office tucked behind a former community center in Brooklyn, Marcus launched a small initiative, the Bench Project. No press release, no big sponsors, just a desk, a phone, and a wall covered in photos. Every photo was a bench, not famous places, not monuments, just ordinary street benches where people had once sat unseen. Next to each one was a name and a date when someone had first reached out for help. At the center of it all was a simple message painted across the wall: "You are not invisible." The Bench Project wasn't a shelter. It was a bridge, a space for transitional support. Not just housing, but legal guidance, trauma-informed therapy, skill building, even mentorship. But its heartbeat was deeper than services. It was dignity. The idea was simple: give people a place to stand while they rebuild their lives. And just as importantly, give them someone who listens. One of the first people to walk through the door was a girl named Brielle. 18. Fierce eyes, quiet voice, fresh out of foster care, with nowhere to go and no one to call. She didn't want pity. She didn't want a lecture. She just needed someone to see her. Marcus sat with her for an hour, just listened. She told him about how social workers called her resilient, like it was a compliment, but never gave her space to be anything but. When she finished, he said, "You don't have to earn rest. You deserve it just for surviving." It was the first time anyone had said that to her. She cried. Then she exhaled. And she came back the next day. And the next. Weeks later, Brielle asked if she could help. Not with paperwork, but with people. So Marcus gave her job. Not charity, purpose. She helped others find their footing. She sat on the same bench outside the center every morning and welcomed anyone who walked by like they mattered. Because they did. Because she did. Word spread slowly but surely. Outreach workers started referring people to the Bench Project, not because it was flashy, but because it worked. Because people came in broken and left believing in themselves again. One man, a veteran with PTSD, stayed 3 nights and ended up working part-time at a local library. A woman fleeing domestic violence came in with nothing but her son and a plastic grocery bag, and 2 months later, found housing, childcare, and work. Each one left behind a photo of the bench where they first met hope again. The wall kept growing. One day, Marcus walked into the office and found a note waiting on his desk. It was from Eli. He hadn't written in months. The note said, "I see what you've built. I see where it started. I'm proud to have shared that bench with you. Keep going. They're watching and they need to." Marcus stared at the note for a long time, then pinned it to the wall, just beneath the photo of the very first bench. The one outside Merrick Plaza. The one where everything changed. Later that week, a journalist came by to write a story on the Bench Project. She asked Marcus, "What made you start this place? After everything with Merrick?" He smiled. It wasn't about revenge, he said. It was about making sure that what happened meant something. That it didn't just end with a man in handcuffs, but began with someone getting up off the ground. She paused. "So, what's your role here now?" Marcus looked around. People were laughing in the kitchen. Brielle was helping someone fill out a job application. A teenager was curled up in a corner with headphones, safe for once. He turned back to the journalist and said, "I just make sure the door stays open." That night, he walked past the same old bench on his way home. It was empty, but not lonely. He sat down, not because he was hiding, but because that bench wasn't a symbol of pain anymore. It was where justice began. And now, it was a part of something bigger than him. At first, the world reacted like it always does, fast, loud, then distracted. The Merrick scandal trended for a few weeks. Clips were shared, debated, memed, and forgotten by most. But something different happened with Marcus's story. It didn't vanish. It lingered. Because this time, the ending wasn't about downfall. It was about what came after. The Bench Project didn't stay small for long. Other cities reached out: Chicago, Atlanta, Detroit. Advocates and nonprofits wanted to know how Marcus had done it. Not just exposed a billionaire, but rebuilt trust in a system most people had written off. So Marcus started showing up, quietly, not as a speaker, not as a hero, as a collaborator. He walked neighborhoods with local outreach workers. He sat on curbs with community leaders. He asked one question again and again. Who's being ignored here? That question became a blueprint. In New York, something even more unexpected began to happen. City council members, once silent during the height of Merrick's influence, proposed new ordinances. One bill made it illegal to destroy or forcibly relocate encampments without providing housing alternatives first. Another pushed for fines on landlords who use shell companies to hide fraud, something Merrick perfected. Each time a vote passed, Marcus didn't claim credit. He just marked the date, pinned it on the bulletin board back at the bench project, and got back to work. The NYPD, once skeptical of Marcus, even hostile during the initial investigation, reached out to invite him into a task force. Not for optics, for training. They asked him to help teach cadets how to engage with vulnerable communities without escalation. At first, Marcus hesitated. But then he saw an opportunity not to change all of law enforcement, but to change one conversation at a time. And he took it. Meanwhile, Charles Merrick's name became a cautionary tale in boardrooms. Law schools dissected his downfall. Ethics panels debated the moral lines crossed by both the corrupt and the ones who dare to challenge them. In one class at Columbia, a professor put Marcus's photo on the screen and asked his students, "What does justice look like when it's not wearing a robe or a badge?" A student answered, "It looks like someone who doesn't walk past suffering." At the bench project, the wall of photos kept growing. Each one was a moment of human connection, a life changed, a name remembered. One morning, Brielle brought in a new printout. It wasn't a bench. It was a street corner in Queens. A young man with a guitar case sleeping beside it. "He stayed with us for a week," she said. "Got clean. Started writing music again. Said he wanted to donate his first gig to the center." Marcus nodded. Then he pinned the photo himself, right next to the original. The center wasn't flashy. There were still cracks in the walls, still days they ran low on supplies, still people they couldn't save in time. But it stood, and every time someone asked, "Why does this work?" the answer was simple. Because it started with one person choosing to see. One day, Marcus received a formal invitation in the mail. Embossed envelope, government seal. It was from the Department of Justice. They were launching a national initiative on ethical field practices in marginalized communities, a new standard. They wanted Marcus to help write it. His words, his experiences, his voice. The night before the first planning meeting, Marcus sat outside the center. The city buzzed around him, cars, sirens shouting. But the bench beside the door stayed still. A young woman walked past, carrying a backpack and a baby. She looked scared. Lost. He stood. "Need a place to rest?" She nodded. And just like that, another story began. The world didn't flip overnight. The system didn't turn pure. But it shifted. And people started paying attention to the spaces they once ignored, the benches, the shelters, the street corners, the quiet humans tucked behind loud headlines. And in those spaces, something new was growing. Not built by rage, not fueled by shame, but by people like Marcus. People who saw, people who stayed, people who believed. It had been exactly 1 year. 1 year since Marcus Boyd sat on a sidewalk bench, handed a sandwich to a man named Eli, and was mocked by a billionaire who thought he owned the city. 1 year since he broke the silence. Since he stopped blending in and chose to stand out. The headlines had faded. The speeches were over. The photo wall inside the bench project kept growing. But outside of it, the world had moved on. That was okay, because the most meaningful things don't stay on front pages. They stay in people. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Rain had passed, the air was crisp, and Marcus had no meetings, no interviews, no obligations. So he walked, past the courthouse, past Merrick Plaza, now renamed, the lettering stripped and replaced by a tech company no one cared about yet. He turned the corner, onto Fifth. There it was, the bench. Still there, still cracked, still crooked, but standing, like it refused to be forgotten. Marcus sat down. No hoodie, no badge, Just himself. He pulled out a small, worn photo from his coat pocket. Eli, holding that clipboard in front of a community center in Ohio. A thank you note was scribbled on the back, but by now Marcus had memorized it. Not the words, just the feeling. A reminder that this all meant something. He sat for a long while, just breathing, watching the city swirl. People passed. Some glanced at him. Some didn't. And then a girl walked by, early 20s, thin jacket, holding a broken umbrella. She looked at him, hesitated, then doubled back. Are you the guy from that video? Marcus turned, smiled gently. I've been called worse. She laughed, a little embarrassed. I wanted to say, thank you. What you did, it changed how I see things. People. Myself, even. He nodded. She bit her lip. My dad's on the street now. I visit him when I can. But it's hard. I don't know how to help him anymore. Marcus reached into his coat and pulled out a card. No title, just an address and a phone number. Have him come by, he said. We'll figure it out. Her eyes welled up. Thank you. He nodded again. She walked off, blending into the noise of the street. Marcus looked down at the bench, ran a hand across the cold metal. He remembered the first time he sat here, how heavy the world felt on his back, how quiet he had to be, how invisible. And now, he'd become everything the system said he couldn't be: loud, visible, trusted. But more than that, he had passed it on. That was the real win. Not Merrick behind bars, not the policy changes, not the viral moment, but this. Someone walking by, seeing him, and stopping. A little boy skipped past, trailing behind his mother. He looked at Marcus. Then, for no reason at all, smiled and waved. Marcus waved back. Just a simple moment. But it stayed. The wind picked up, and with it came the soft sound of a saxophone from a subway grate. A kind of city symphony, the good and the hard and the beautiful, all mixed together. Marcus leaned back against the bench, closed his eyes, breathed. He didn't fix the world, but he cracked it open. He didn't win a war, but he changed a fight. He didn't become a hero. He became real. And in a world that ignores the invisible, that's everything. He was once just a man on a bench. Now, he's the reason someone else stands up.